This is my Cookery Zone podcast, a podcast brought to you by my Cookery Zone platform, also known as the connoisseur in food reporting.
I can't say much on sugar and its consumption, but I want to contribute, so here it goes. I'm a sweet tooth, so for me, and in most cases, a lot is good, but there is such a thing as too much. It is like salt. The right amount tastes so good and so sweet, but too much you'd probably be shedding tears.
Sugar, as remotely known, is the sole cause of diabetes. This notion made me run away from majorly taking sugar for a long time. Since I resumed its intake, I have developed interest in it and can hardly take any meal without its presence.
I remember when I was young, my mom would water down the juice and fruit drinks because they taste too sweet, and too much sugar will make your heart swell, and as a boy, your penis disappear or shrink. The funny truth, which I learn as I grow older, is whether you water it down or not, it's still the same quantity of sugar in that glass. The only thing that changes is the taste. Sugar does not make people fat. It doesn't cause diabetes, nor does it cause cardiovascular diseases. It doesn't cause hyperactivity in children or dental problems. These are all just myths. Sugar definitely doesn't make your penis shrink or disappear.
Hi, I'm Iyanoluwa Timtope. I'm the host of my Cookery Zone podcast, a food podcast that focuses on food reportage and discussion with food-oriented people. What you heard earlier on the episode are the opinions of some of our contributors. They shared their opinions on sugar, the myth and belief, and the general narrative they have about its consumption. Now, if you have a topic you want us to talk about, feel free to email us at mycookeryzonepodcast@gmail.com and also join in the conversation online using the hashtag MCZpodcast. Do note that this is our last episode for this season. What better way of welcoming you to this special episode, Too Much Sugar? Before the end, I'll be sharing with you the theme for this year's World Diabetes Day and telling you a realistic way of applying. Let's begin. Salt and sugar have been identified by medical practitioners as the most dangerous to humankind. This should be of worry if consumed in excess, as salt has been identified as a contributing factor of high blood pressure or hypertension, to how sugar has been linked to high blood sugar levels in the human body. While researching on this topic, a particular disease kept popping up. This disease is usually linked to the high concentration of sugar in the body. The disease is called diabetes. Diabetes mellitus is a medical disorder characterized by varying or persistent hypoglycemia, which is an unusual high concentration of sugar in the blood. When we say sugar, not necessarily in the granulated or cubed form, but instead the level of sugar in one's diet that later makes it into the bloodstream. When excess sugar is found in the blood, WebMD made it known that the extra insulin in your bloodstream can affect your arteries. It causes their walls to get inflamed, grow thicker than normal, and stiffer. This stresses the heart and damages it over time. This can lead to heart disease. As we mark World Diabetes Day, my Cookery Zone is bringing you this podcast episode that features Dr. Ibukun Afolami, a scientist, a biochemist by training, and a lecturer at the Human Nutrition and Dietetics University of Ibadan.
So the problem with diabetes is what we call glucose intolerance. Definitely, there is such a thing as consumption of too much sugar. Yes, so indeed, the answer is yes.
After establishing the fact that there is a possibility of consuming too much sugar, one might wonder the significance and role sugar play in the body.
Well, sugar is all forms of carbohydrate, in the sense that anytime we take carbohydrates, everything carbohydrates in our diet is eventually converted to sugar. Although it's very important to be very specific, because usually when we talk about sugars, there's a lot of ambiguity in the sense that you never know what sugar people are talking about. Sugars are not the same. So there's fructose sugar, there's glucose sugar, there's lactose sugar from milk, there's sucrose sugar from cane sugar, from sugar canes and all that. There's galactose sugar from milk. There's maltose sugar from malt and beet. So, and they all have different metabolic functions, different metabolic roles that they play in the body. So I think usually talking about sugars, that's the first thing that should be clarified. And there's a whole cliche about sugar, but not all sugars are the same.
At this point, you might want to ask which of these sugars is responsible for diabetes. I did ask, and here's the response. You have various sugars in the food we take that build up, that break down into sugar in the bloodstream when digestion takes place. When you spoke about fructose sugar and the glucose itself from carbohydrates. Now, which of these sugars causes diabetes?
Glucose, basically, so excess glucose in the bloodstream.
Okay. When we say someone has too much sugar in the body system, or even less sugar, what does it mean?
So usually when people talk about too much sugar in the body system, in many cases, what people are talking about is too much glucose sugar. And that is associated with diabetes and insulin intolerance in that sense. So to understand that, like I said, all the foods, the carbohydrate foods that we eat eventually is broken down from the large sugar, if you want to call it that, called carbohydrates, to the small sugar, which, like I've mentioned earlier, can be many types of sugars. So during glucose intolerance, which eventually leads to diabetes, what happens is that these sugars are excessive in the blood. Ordinarily, as the sugars are broken down from the different foods that we eat, they are absorbed, they are transported from the small intestine into the bloodstream. And ordinarily, if everything is going on fine, the cells absorb these sugars, and absorption is simply, or they assimilate them, that's a technical word. So during absorption, the sugars enter the blood, right? But during assimilation, the sugars they leave the blood into the cells. And this is the natural thing, this is what is expected. So when these sugars are assimilated into the cells, the concentration of the sugars is reduced in the bloodstream. And with that way, things are normal. And these sugars in the cell are now used to generate energy, which actually provides energy for the person as a human being, but also energy for the cellular activities and tissue activities. Okay, so that's what you expect under normal metabolism. So these sugars are broken down and cleared from the bloodstream and transferred into the cells where they are needed to generate energy. But of course, when you say there is excessive sugar, yes, in principle you say it's excessive because the mechanism that is responsible for transporting it from the blood into the cells is broken in that sense. So instead of the sugars being assimilated into the cells and used for energy, they just keep hovering in that sense in the blood, and this is what is dangerous, and that's what we call diabetes.
If you did pay attention to some of the responses from our contributors, and if you as well go through the internet, there are so many misconceptions and myths about diabetes. Dr. Ibukun demystified these misconceptions and spoke largely on the clinical manifestations associated with diabetes.
There are lots of facts about diabetes, so to start with, many people don't even know the sugars we're talking about in the case of diabetes. Many people don't even understand properly what exactly how exactly diabetes is manifested. Okay, but I don't know which ones are the common ones because there are different facts and myths that we have about diabetes in different quarters.
Okay.
So these days we have lots of quacks, yeah, that are in the market, yeah, and everybody claims to be an expert. But I think, yeah, this is what diabetes is. So for the education of the public, this is very important. Of course, there's also a clinical side of diabetes in terms of its clinical manifestations, in terms of the other things that it affects. So, for example, um, it's also tightly connected with body weight, and if it's not properly managed, it has other clinical manifestations that affect the eyesight, and so on and so forth. So, but these are clinical things, and they're quite standard.
As earlier promised, we end this episode with the theme for this year, which is access to diabetic care. We put it to you that the perfect time to seek medical care or checkup is now, not tomorrow or the next. We return back to Dr. Ibukun to listen to his final take on too much sugar.
The problem with diabetes is not the sugar we take. So the problem with diabetes is when things go bad. So the problem with diabetes is what we call glucose intolerance. So ordinarily the body has mechanisms, and the mechanism by which the body converts these excessive sugars into other forms is there. So primarily it's controlled by the pancreas, the islet of Langerhans, as they're called, in the pancreas, the beta cells in the pancreas. So, in principle, if the body is functioning properly, yes, this shouldn't be a problem. So you even have people that take lots of sugars, and yeah, nothing goes wrong. So there's a genetic aspect, there's an environmental aspect to it, and of course, we can always control the amount of sugars we take. To make sure that we don't take in excess. Okay, yes, but largely we can't avoid sugars because, like I said, so long as you're taking carbohydrates, the body's converting it into glucose.
Above all, for a more healthier lifestyle, we need to inculcate healthy eating habits that not only help boost immune system, but will in the long run promote good health. We are so happy for you to have been a part of my Cookery Zone podcast season 1. As I stated earlier, this is our last episode for the season, as we'll be taking a break to record new episodes. If this is your first time of listening, do well to listen to the episodes, and when you do, rate, subscribe and share. Share your thoughts using the hashtag MCZ Podcast and follow us at MCZ Podcast or at my Cookery Zone. Thanks to Dr. Ibukun Afolami from the Department of Human Nutrition and Dietetics, University of Ibadan, for sharing his knowledge on this episode. Many thanks to Barry and Tayo for their contribution. And to the team at my Cookery Zone, Iyanoluwa Komolafe and Daniel Chuko, who acted as the voice actors, and a special thanks to Emmanuel Nelson for his help on this episode. I am Iyanoluwa Fagbiyi Temitope. See you in 2022 as we bring you a brand new episode and season of my Cookery Zone podcast, a podcast brought to you by my Cookery Zone platform, also known as the Connoisseur in food reporting. My Cookery Zone podcast is brought to you by my Cookery Zone platform. Thank you for listening.